The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Welcome to Bronx Talk, the Bronx's flagship television talk show. The show is live tonight and our phones are open, so please join us at 718-960-7241. You can also email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Well, as unemployment numbers continue to be problematic in the Bronx, there's a segment of the population that historically might be more difficult to place in jobs, but they're no more or less deserving of an opportunity to work for themselves and their families than anyone else. There's an organization that's opening a facility to serve these people in a well-known place in the South Bronx. So tonight we'll talk about people with all kinds of disabilities and barriers and challenges involved in getting them employed. We'll also talk about the successes that FedCap has had in supporting their employment needs as they get ready to open their new facility in the Banknote Building in Hunts Point. Please join me in welcoming FedCap President and CEO Christine McMahon. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And also FedCap Vice President Terry Blackwell. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Let's start with you, Ms. McMahon. Let's just talk in general about the Bronx and give me kind of the landscape of people with disabilities. And I know that you serve a wider population than just people with what we may think of as traditional disabilities. How are we doing? We have more, we have fewer. Are they being served? Paint the picture for us so we know where to go from here.
Sure. The Bronx is an interesting borough. It has some of the most significantly problematic health indicators: high dropout rates, high asthma rates, poor health indicators. But on the plus side, there's a tremendous amount of organizations and resources coming into the South Bronx in particular to help change some of the trajectory of some of those figures. And we want to be a part of that. One of the most significant problems facing residents of the South Bronx is, in fact, the unemployment rate. It's estimated as high as 30% in pockets of the South Bronx. And we hope to make an impact to those figures.
Mr. Blackwell, let's talk about the challenges of dealing with people who have some challenges and what you have to do to go the next level, and what anybody would have to do to help them, number one, get trained so that they can be employed, and then number two, obviously, get them a job.
Well, FedCap has been around for it'll be 75 years this coming November, and we've focused on vocational rehabilitation as a path to meaningful employment, sustainable employment. And the business that we're bringing into the banknote is jobs that are basically commercially viable, that we've actually already run this business in Manhattan, and now we're moving it up to the Bronx to afford some people the opportunity to make it regular living wage.
We have some pictures. I do want to show a picture of the Banknote Building, and then at the same time, you can even, there's which everybody knows right there on Garrison Avenue. It's one of the most historic structures in the Bronx. Tell me the kinds of things that FedCap has done over the 75 years, and I know we have some pictures that people can see of people who've been trained and been working in those kinds of things.
Well, FedCap has historically attempted to right-size whatever was going wrong at that time. If you go back in time to when we first started, ironically, employment was a significant issue at that time, and FedCap was pioneering in their development of work opportunities for people with pretty significant barriers at that time. As the years went on, FedCap was always far ahead of the curve in terms of really pushing the envelope for people with barriers to live, holistic lives in the community, not only employment, but also a social network. And lots of folks might remember FedCap from its early days. It was called the Federation of the Handicapped, and it really played a major role in all 5 boroughs in helping people really connect to each other at the time that was significantly problematic. our interest in the banknote building has come from a number of listening sessions that we held in this borough itself. And one of the most interesting things we came out of some of those sessions with was really that people there who wanted to work were finding that transportation issues in this pocket of the city were very, very problematic. They also brought up an interesting point that lots of economic stimulation was going on, and in fact, business was coming into the South Bronx at that time, but the jobs weren't going to residents of the South Bronx. They were going to other folks outside of the Bronx.
And if I can interject, some of whom might have some of the barriers, and we're going to articulate what some of those barriers might be. So that's the problem. So the jobs come in, and you say, well, we all want jobs for people of the Bronx, but if more of the population has barriers, issues, whatever we want to call them, if we don't address those things, then we're going to be going in a cycle that's never going to happen.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. So we went right to the employers of the community and some of the folks in charge of economic development in the area and tried to figure out, where the disconnect was, what some of the gaps were. And a couple of themes emerged. One, there was a high frequency of dropout. And so the education levels in this particular pocket of the South Bronx are difficult to accommodate. And so what we're trying to bring in is sort of a training program, and we're making a commitment to this area, as I know many other agencies have, to really look in and find those individuals who might be able to be trained right from this community and spend some time at our facility in the South Bronx and become employed there. And from there go on to other arenas, possibly into some of the commercial operations.
Here's a really unfair question, and I'm asking it based on the success of 75 years. What's the trick? How have you been able to do this with some success when many others have tried? And certainly if you were to survey the landscape that I painted to start the show, you'd say, this is not possible. Unemployment is sky high. How are you able to get people from point A to that very important point B?
Well, we have some great community partners. Let me start by saying our board of directors is just a fabulous group of individuals who have really, made a commitment to quality, long-term, sustainable help for the populations we serve, and that makes a big difference. So we're not churning people through our organization to get a quick fix. Our board is really demanding long-term, thoughtful, sustainable assistance for the people we serve.
That sounds like you need a big foundation or a strong foundation for those people.
Absolutely.
And how do you do that?
For the clients that we serve, the other big stake in the ground, in addition to our board's commitment, is really some of our other partners. VESID, as one example, they're a city organization that helps identify and screen and train and provide vocational counseling to those individuals who qualify. And they've been a long-standing partner and a leader, quite frankly, in helping develop training programs and funding training programs that allow people to be much more successful in their jobs.
This is a very important Bronx word, and we talk about it in many segments of our population, and that's of our many segments of our life in the Bronx, and that's partnerships. So
Absolutely.
You develop partnerships, I'm assuming not only with VESID, but with other not-for-profits,
Absolutely.
which I know you're anxious to do when you get really settled into the Bronx. Mr. Blackwell, let's talk about the other part of the landscape, and that is the types of people you serve. Now, I initially, when we were planning the show, was really talking about people with disabilities, but I've been educated, and I've learned that really you work with a larger population that has barriers as well. Mm-hmm. Who are those people?
Those persons could be individuals coming through substance abuse programs that have gotten their lives together but have some need for supports. It could be we work with a large number of people who are deaf. Some of the persons we work with are people who are visually impaired but can perform the task. Recently, we've made a recommitment to veterans in the South Bronx, and we're working with those individuals who are coming back to the United States from Iraq and Afghanistan. What are their needs? What are the needs around family? And so we really match the job and the job requirements to the skills of the individual.
How do you find the jobs? How do you make sure that they're trained? And I know one of the things that you're so proud of is the ongoing support. You don't just throw them in a job and then you disappear, because there are issues that come up. So let's talk about some of those processes that really work for you.
Well, in this particular instance with the banknote building, we have a bit of a ringer because we've actually been operating this business down in Manhattan at 19th Street now for well over a dozen years. And so we're physically
so
relocating
good. The Bronx is getting something that works. How
already
nice.
is up, running, and tested. And
Excellent.
so, yeah, we understand that there is a need for supportive counseling after the placement, after the training, after the fact. And we've already begun outreach to, for example, New York City Board of Ed to talk to them about emerging high school students that are unemployed. Could we perhaps start to do training while the kids are still in school? And so these are things that we've done as a foundation before the initiative moves to the Bronx.
And what jobs? What jobs do they get? You want to respond to that?
Just another important partner here in New York City is NYSED, and this is a piece of legislation and a very important piece of the New York landscape in particular as it relates to jobs. It allows organizations like FedCap, but a host of organizations, basically compete for municipal and state employment opportunities, and so that is how some of our jobs.
What were those people doing in those pictures that we saw? They were kind of like working at a, I can't think of what the word is.
I didn't see the picture.
You know,
Yeah.
oh, you didn't see
Oh,
what
they
the
must-
picture's
it
like.
may-
Like there, you can take a look.
Oh,
those
wonderful. Well, yeah,
probably the
that's our
mailing.
office services and mail. Yeah, in fact, that's one of
So that's working on a production line
Absolutely.
of some kind in a
Well,
mailroom and those kinds of things.
One of the businesses we're bringing to the South Bronx, to the Banknote Building, is in fact a full-fledged production mail house. And so we have dozens of contracts from a variety of people around, including CUNY, around the city, and we bid competitively, and we get contracts in, and we control the folks who are hiring these
And I'm
jobs.
guessing, Mr. Blackwell, that the people that you place, because they know how far they've had to come, they turn out to be, in many cases, the best employees, the most responsible and the most dedicated and the most eager employees an employer could find.
There's not a whole lot to add to that.
You say yes.
That would be yes.
You know, well, another thing that I do want to talk about, and I think it might hit home with many people in the Bronx, is the rise in autistic children that we see. I mean, the numbers bear it out. This poses a very important challenge because not only are you dealing with adults now, we're dealing with children who are going to have issues in the future. What can be done for families so that they can plan for the future for autistic children?
New York actually has a fairly rich array of services for both children and adults compared to adjacent states. I happen to have two sons who have autistic spectrum disorder, Asperger's. And in the state that I live in, as young adults, they would have a tremendous difficulty getting services.
Care to say?
New Jersey.
Oh,
right?
okay. I love to cast aspersions.
That's they've earned it. But I think, having been familiar with both State Education Department, New York City Board of Education, and the Office for Persons with Disabilities, New York has a wide array of nationally prominent programs for persons with autism.
Mm-hmm. And do you focus on it? Do you folks deal with it, or how
We've
do you
begun
do it?
to. We have, as an organization, as well as at the national level, there's an organization called NISH, which is the National Institute for Severely Handicapped, who has made a commitment to recognizing that this is a growing population and the needs are somewhat different. The training needs are very often more intense because of their nature. They tend to be one-to-one as opposed to small group. Mm-hmm. It is becoming a focal point both for our organization and at a national level.
And I think
Do you want to add something?
only that you hit the nail on the head when you ask, what can families do, and I think planning and early intervention are key. And so, independent of what happens beyond that you do need to plan and plan early.
Do they contact? Let's say you have an autistic child that they have hopes for, and we'd like to think every parent has hope
Absolutely.
for every child. Do they contact you early? Do they work through the school system? I mean, let's get some advice on the table.
Right. I would start with their school system. I mean, that's a great place to start the dialogue because there are already laws and protocols in place for appropriate levels of vocational assessments and intervention early on in the child's education. And in fact, the last thing you want to do is wait till you leave the school setting for this, and parents should be really, I won't say demanding, but demanding might be the right word.
Proactive is a good way.
And
Sure.
right up there to aggressive if need be, to really get across the long-term future goals for your child and do it early.
I want to talk about another segment of the population that you've already mentioned, and I know, Ms. McMahon, this is very important to you and really to all of us as Americans, and that's our veterans who are returning. some of them may be physically disabled. Certainly there are mental and psychological issues. What are you seeing from veterans? And then we can talk about what you're doing to address those issues.
You know, nationally, we're hearing that there are roughly 170,000 unemployed service members returning across all branches, and this is they're returning at a time when our economic landscape is really troublesome beyond their return, and so this is really a difficult situation. We find that there's a mixed group coming back. They're estimating about 25% of the returning service members have some kind of disability, and of that, as many as 50% of them have multiple disabilities, including PTSD and perhaps another disability alongside that. So our interest in terms of this veteran population, we really feel as though the Veterans Affairs and the Department of Labor have really put out a large and robust and effective infrastructure, and it's working well. It's working well for a good number of our returning service members, and there's one-stops and lots of resources through the internet for those service members who are able to be able to access reliable advice, counseling, and employment. We're concentrating on those individuals for whom that type of intervention might not be enough.
Not enough.
Just not enough. And so
and I think, if I can just interject, it's not hard for us to imagine that being the case for many of the servicemen and women.
And we have a commitment to responding early to this problem. I mean, a service member coming back not in their best shape, and a growing number of women coming back from service as well, the longer they're out of work, the more it exacerbates some of the issues that they're facing.
Describe to me then how it works. They'll pick up the phone and say, "Hi, FedCap, it's me," or are they referred to from the VA? I mean, how does
any
it work?
number of ways.
And they don't want to know what you do after
Right.
that.
Any number of ways a veteran can get to us. One, if they've applied for their VA discharge benefits, there will be a host of community providers available to them. There'll be, and this is what I mean about, some service members need a little extra help than maybe just lists, but the local VAs will be able to direct them. Voc Rehab will be able to direct them, VESID, and actually we've had lots of calls from returning service members directly because we're online as well, and we are targeting that population.
Can you give me some numbers about what, and I'm sure once you decide that you're going to move into the Bronx or any locale, give me some numbers on the number of people you expect to serve in any sorts of segments of the population, because I think people would be interested in the size of what you've got going on.
Well, in the South Bronx in particular, we really came out of the gate trying to understand the nature of the problem. One of the things we did not want to do is come in sort of shooting, part of the expression, and just contribute to a lot of noise and
here we are,
making promises. Exactly. Our focus and our strategy was really to come in and listen. We know that there are a tremendous amount of resources and great organizations providing services in the Bronx today, and we know that there are employers who are interested and have been interested in this area.
Are there?
Yeah, there have been. There have been lots of efforts. The Economic Development Center here in the Bronx is very, very active, and just on the other side of the banknote building is just a thriving businesses are coming in. It's a big food service operation over there, and those are some of the people we talked to ascertain what the issues were. What are some of the gaps? Why aren't residents of the Bronx getting these jobs? And we really heard lots of important things from the community itself, including some of the other not-for-profit providers who have been providing great work here for a long time. Very, very difficult to bridge the gap if employers are looking for a certain level of training, a certain level of expertise. So we made a commitment to start our work with about 12 to 15 jobs, which is what we're going to start with in the banknote building. But our long-term goal is 150 jobs in 3 to 5 years. Located right there in the South Bronx.
And when you say that, so that means that people get placed in the jobs and you continue to support them with services,
correct,
monitor how they're doing, work with their employers, and
absolutely. And in the case of the banknote building, and part of the FedCap strategy is we will go out and start up small businesses like the business we're going to bring to the banknote building. So we will be able to make a commitment to the people who actually live in that community. And that was very important to us, that we want to provide a solution to a community for the residents of that community.
Mr. Blackwell, let's talk a little bit about other populations and the history of the Bronx. There was a shot of the banknote building again. But the history of the Bronx, it's no secret we have gone through terrible periods of drug addiction, and people were burnt out. Many people have recovered. Some people were incarcerated as a result. Talk to me about that population, what the challenges are to somebody who may have gone through that and now is, whatever, 30, 40, or 50 years old, has a family and certainly wants to do well. What are the issues and how do you address those issues?
Well, the issues are complex, but they do come back to coming in and listening. You know, it's one thing, Christine mentioned the listening sessions that we ran around the Bronx, you know, to what does contribute to that poverty, what does continue to contribute to the difficulties of that family, what are the needs? One of the things that was fascinating to me for many years was there was no capability of developing mental health services for persons who are on Medicaid, and the state of New York has now opened that process up. And so we're looking at supporting families through mental health services that'll surround the banknote building and its workers.
If I can just interject, it's just so easy to dispense with those people and say, well, they made a mistake, they burnt out or something, and here they are at the age of 40, 50, ready to go. Maybe we've done a decent job at rehabilitating them, and yet we've got to find something for them. So go ahead. Continue.
Well, and I think the issue, there are many issues that sustain poverty, to so to speak. But unemployment, we were looking at some recent data relative to the correlation between unemployment and mental health, and there is a strong correlation that, you know, when people are engaged meaningfully, it has a tremendous impact on self-esteem and the feeling of belonging to community. And so FedCap's model is that of community. You know, that's the focus, is to not come in, as Christine was saying, from the outside as though we know it all, but to come in and ask the questions about what is the need, and then to match the services with the need.
I'm going to go back to the word that I used earlier about partnerships. It seems to me, I mean, unless you were a trained drug counselor, you're going to have to deal with somebody who has been through that, and in order to do that, you've got to, I'm assuming, work with the real experts in the field.
Right, and not reinvent services that are already present, but to engage the community that's out there and to effectively facilitate networking those services.
Mm-hmm. Ms. McMahon, let's talk about another. I mean, there's so many interesting segments of the population, again, that so many people would say, well, you know, all right, that was that situation, and we have other issues, but they, of course, as I said at the outset, are deserving of opportunities. Children coming out of foster care, who have been in foster care, and now they may be teenagers, they may be whatever, you can articulate who they are, and then what are those challenges and how do we get them from point A to point B?
Well, once again, we know there's our foster care system and our child welfare systems in general here in the city have, they've taken some hits over the years just in terms of criticism, but the recent trends coming out of our foster care, entire child welfare system, including juvenile justice, is really on the rise in terms of positive directions and positive outcomes. One of the most difficult elements of, I think, the foster care arena is when that child approaches their 18, 19, 20th birthday and really goes off into the world. And quite frankly, I don't know a 19-year-old who can go off, today.
No matter where they've been,
I don't care where they were brought up,
right?
Right? They're very difficult. So we're very concerned about that particular piece of the child welfare population that are discharging. And what we're finding is that, again, the system itself is doing a great job for a number of children in their permanent, the extent to which their permanent relationships have been rebuilt, reunification, and a lot of good work is going on. But there are some kids falling through the cracks, and probably in numbers that we don't want to see.
And again, much like veterans or others who are referred to you, so they're referred to you through the foster care system or from the city, or they contact you individually. I mean,
right. We find these. At this point, we're getting these folks after the fact, and that's how it is. We became interested in this population. We've come to understand that a lot of our young people coming in for supported work or looking for jobs, they may even be living in homeless shelters at this point, and they've exited the system. And we became aware of the fact that there were a cohort of children leaving the system for whom the level of resources available just didn't do the trick, and those are the kids that are entering homeless shelters and jobless and sort of spiraling.
We put the website up there. Is there a phone number if somebody's watching us and says, you know what, either I or my family or somebody that they can call and say, you know what, I heard this is in the Bronx and I want to refer somebody, or I need help myself. What do we do?
Absolutely. We'll get you a number. Somebody will
they're going to
call you a number. They should.
Oh, Jane is telling me they're going to put it up.
Yeah.
And there it is, 727-4200. Mr. Blackwell, just to begin to put it in perspective, I ask this question a lot in a lot of different arenas. Hopeful or hopeless? And if it is hopeful, how do you find it inside you when the economic situation is not good for anyone to find ways to place these people, train them and place them?
Hopeful. There are numerous reasons. I've been doing this. It'll be 30 years this month. I've been involved with the developmentally disabled in New York. And what I've found with FedCap is an intersection of meaningful employment that really ties into so many different things that I've done and that are being done by community partners out there, that I have a lot of hope in the work that we're doing and we're going to continue to do.
Mm-hmm. Ms. McMahon, we'll give you the final word. What's the bottom line here as far as identifying the people and putting them to work? When you go into work every day, what's like your mission and your charge that you're ready to do?
Well, I think our tagline and combined with our mission says it all, that we want to create long-term economic independence for people who come through our doors. And to the extent that we can, we want to affect the systems out there so that all people are experiencing long-term economic independence who want it.
Well, I do want to thank you personally and professionally for not only coming on the show, but coming to the Bronx. I mean, it's always our mission on this show to show people resources that they have and to be hopeful about who they are. And it doesn't matter what your circumstances may be, there may be somebody who can assist. And so, Terry, thank you so much. Christine, thank you so much. And folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of our show are available at blip.tv. Just search for Bronx Talk. If you're interested in tonight's topic and advocating for people with disabilities and other barriers, be sure to tune in to Special People, Special Issues, hosted by our friend Larry Seiler on BronxNet Sundays at noon and 9 here on Channel 67 and Verizon Fios 33. Now, next week, we'll do a review of Primary Day, and then on September 27th, it's the Trees on Pelham Parkway. And make a note that on October 18th, Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. will be our guest. So we're always doing something interesting and different, and that's why we're here. Bronx Talk Monday nights at 9 on BronxNet's Cablevision Channel 67, Verizon Fios 33. Special thanks to producer Jane Filoro, director Michael Arias, and our cast of thousands up in the booth. And to you, good night.
You're really not that talented.
You're not attractive.
Too fat.
You're too short.
Too old? Why don't you just give up?
Give up.
Give up.
Just give up.
According to estimates, over 1 billion people live in appalling levels of poverty. Denied even basic